Hey everyone, Tyler here at The Movie Beat, back with another video. I'm going to be sort of kicking off 2021 with a little series here on South Korean sci-fi films as we sort of get ready for the upcoming 2021 sci-fi, looks like an epic Korean film called Space Sweepers that has been postponed for a long time because of coronavirus, but it's set to release in early February internationally on Netflix. So kind of like how Time to Hunt and The Call from last year were released. So by doing this, I want to sort of build some hype a little bit, but I also want to keep expectations in check. So for those of you who have been following South Korean film for a while now, you'll probably realize, or you probably already know, that sci-fi is probably one of the weaker genres that we can see in Korean cinema. There have been many ambitious attempts at sci-fi in the past, and most of them have flopped pretty hard for a lot of different reasons. But I think it's safe to say that sci-fi is usually a genre that requires bigger budgets, and the bigger the budget, you get the more voices, the more corporate it gets, and it just kind of becomes either like it was very similar to something we've seen in the past, or just not very original. And obviously some of the effects have been a letdown. So in this new series that I've kind of tried to put together, I'm going to be focusing on 3 different broad sci-fi themes to sort of organize some different films into these categories. So I've sort of extended the definition of sci-fi a little bit, just because there aren't so many South Korean sci-fi films to choose from. So I'm hoping that this, if you guys want to revisit some of these films, or I just decided to sort of give these another look. I had seen most of them before, but I've basically spent the last couple weeks just really diving into the sci-fi genre. I'm rewatching some of my favorite American sci-fi films, as well as these Korean sci-fi films, or films that I feel like fit the sci-fi genre here. And so the first category, or the first theme of sci-fi that I'm going to be looking at or presenting in this volume 1 of my sci-fi South Korean series, is looking at the theme of exploring the unknown, deep space, aliens, and sea monsters. So I hope you guys are excited, looking forward to this upcoming series that I'm putting together. It's going to be at least 3 parts, so it's taking me some time to put these together, so please bear with me, and I hope you enjoy them. So let's take a look at the films that fit this category as we reflect back on the different South Korean sci-fi efforts as we prepare for the upcoming Space Sweepers, highly anticipated Space Sweepers early next month, as we build some hype as well as keep our expectations in check. So here we go. So the first film we're going to be looking at is the film called AM 11 O'Clock, or 11 AM. It's from 2013. It was directed by Kim Hyun-suk, who also directed YMCA Baseball Team. So this one was about a time machine that was being developed using a particle accelerator deep within a blue hole on the ocean floor to create a mini black hole that opens up a wormhole in which to travel to the future through. So pretty ambitious plot, and I like how it uses some of these sci-fi concepts kind of loosely, but they try to sort of make it make sense as well. So 3 years into the project, unimpressive results have put further funding into jeopardy as the crew is ordered to evacuate the site. But before their final day, a simulation capable of harnessing enough energy to send 2 crew members 1 day into the future for just 15 minutes becomes the crew's last-ditch effort at making a breakthrough. But when their short trip reveals not only a future laboratory in shambles and an unstable reactor core set to explode, but there's also an unidentified person that tries to kill them upon their arrival into the future. In their panic to return, disastrous results leave 1 crew member behind in the future. So using collected CCTV data from the time-traveled trip, the crew has just 1 day to change the future of the lab and to find out what happened to their colleague. So this is one of those inescapable time paradox types that's moderately engaging, I would say, as it devolves into more of a by-the-numbers survival film that leaves you sort of guessing who to trust. So there's some cheesy one-liners in this one, and I felt like the soundtrack was a bit uninspired. There's also some shaky attempts at explaining the scientific principles at the heart of their creation under the water that don't do a great job at building the characters or the world that kind of holds this film back a bit. Also, the characters overlook an obvious clue that almost every audience member will pick up on initially that becomes mildly frustrating, I would say. But besides not offering a whole lot in the way of new experiences, 11 a.m., this movie is quite watchable and moderately fun, I think, especially when it comes to seeing the crew react to witnessing their devastating futures from that partially recovered CCTV footage that shows some of their final moments from the future. So how each crew member's destiny plays out to reach that particular point, and their efforts to change their futures within that 24-hour window that they get, become really the meat and bones of this film's entertainment. And for me, I think fans of time paradoxes might also be able to get into. So I really like some of the actors, Jung Jae-young and Kim Ok-bin. You guys have probably seen me talk about some of these actors. Kim Ok-bin, everyone probably saw from The Villainous or Thirst. I really actually liked the atmosphere and environment in this one. It kind of felt like an extended episode of Battlestar Galactica or something like that. So again, it's not offering a whole lot, but it was fairly good at doing what it did. So I would definitely rate this one a pretty solid 6.5 out of 10. As far as sci-fi goes, this is probably one of my more enjoyable, and I think it's actually one of the more overlooked of all the Korean sci-fi films. So the next one we're going to be looking at is called Sector 7. This is directed by Kim Ji-hoon, who brought us May 18th and The Tower. And it's about a brash oil rigger named Hae-jun, played by Ha Ji-won, who is really determined to find oil at the Sector 7 drilling site after having lost her father some 25 years earlier at the same site in an underwater accident. So when the site is deemed a failure after multiple drill sites fail to produce oil, the crew is called to retire. But when the old Sector 7 manager, played by Ahn Sung-ki, who's also a family friend of Hae-jun, returns to the rig to help close the site, he sort of has a secret plan of his own, and so he and the remaining crew members really make a one last-ditch effort to strike oil before everything really closes shop. So when luck finally comes their way, the crew briefly enjoys in their spoils, and life on the rig becomes joyous, but their celebrations are, of course, cut short when the sudden arrival of a mysterious, man-eating beast begins having its way with the crew. So the performance in this one, Sector 7, are kind of uncomfortable to watch because the character actions, the mannerisms are just so exaggerated. They were definitely going for something like an Ellen Ripley type character with Ha Ji-won's character, from Alien. Really tough, capable, really just badass female lead who will square off with the monster. But while she's more than tough enough, I think, for the role and her character and everything, you don't quite feel the danger in Sector 7 when she goes head to head with the beast. So also veteran actor Ahn Sung-ki has some kind of fun, like Gandalf type moments from Lord of the Rings, but that just kind of goes into more of the imitation and originality that Sector 7 suffers from not having a lot of. Also, while it's arguably a stylistic choice, I think Sector 7 uses a bit too much green screen and CGI effects for its own good that makes nearly the entire production feel like an extended video game cinematic or perhaps a manga adaptation at best. There are some moments, though, of really awesome imagery at times to really lavish in. The monster is also pretty wild, like something out of the Resident Evil or Dead Space franchises. The final battle with the hideous creature lasts nearly 40 minutes, and it was so over the top and crazy that I actually found myself enjoying it quite a bit as a creature feature. So if you guys think the movie's Deep Blue Sea meets Alien 3 aboard the Deepwater Horizon, you've got Sector 7 right there. So doesn't do too many things new, but it was very watchable as far as a monster type movie. So pretty interesting, I think, overall. But again, this one was pretty, I would say, trashed when it came out. Everybody seemed to hate it, and I think a lot of people just passed on it without even giving it a try. So I think if you guys go back and you let the green screen or some of the CGI let that slide a little bit, you're gonna have some fun with this one a little bit, I think. So Sector 7, I think, was not as bad as people say it was, so I would definitely rate it a 5.5 out of 10, so not a throwaway project at all. I think it's probably one of the better Korean monster movies. There's not that many, but obviously movies like The Host, Bong Joon-ho's The Host, is like number one for monster movies in Korea, but this one, I think, if you guys watched that movie Monstrum, it's probably around there as far as watchability. So I would say check out Sector 7. So another one that I wanted to talk about in this episode of my Korean sci-fi series is a piece from the collection, the sci-fi collection called Doomsday Book from 2012. Two different directors, Kim Ji-woon and Im Pil-sung, made some shorts for this. They are pretty interesting, I must say. So the one episode that I want to include for this part of my sci-fi series is actually the last installment of Doomsday Book. It's called Happy Birthday. It was directed by Im Pil-sung. So this one is about a world that's in panic when a 10-kilometer wide meteor is found to be approaching Earth. As much of civilization is threatened, families take to their private bunkers and bomb shelters where they hope to ride out the impact and survive during the many expected years of unlivable surface conditions. So the story in this one is by far the wackiest in all of the Doomsday Book entries. It's also just so silly overall. It just feels like you gave a project, or I gave a project to like some of my first graders, and I said, just think of the craziest thing possible, and I had them pass it around. So you do a part, you do a part, you do a part, you do a part, because this thing just goes from A to Z to X to B to 4, like to exclamation point. So it's so weird. So it's really out there as it attempts to portray contact with alien intelligence through dimensional and wiring anomalies within the internet, that somehow allows a 10-year-old girl in the film who put in an online order for her uncle's broken billiards ball, an 8-ball, to have caused this bizarre interstellar delivery. So it's really an 8-ball flinging towards Earth, a giant meteor that looks like an 8-ball. It's almost too far out there to be compelling in any way, and will probably only appeal to, in my opinion, a very young audience, just for its sheer ridiculousness. But it does, however, feature some great otherworldly vibes and visuals, especially in its final minutes, that I really wish would have been the main focus of the story overall. So I would probably rate this one a 5 out of 10 just for ambition. It's definitely a pretty scatterbrained one, but definitely Doomsday Book. I'm going to be having the feature some of the other entries in my other episodes. So look forward to that, please. The last one I want to talk about in this episode of my sci-fi series is one of my all-time favorite Korean films called Save the Green Planet from 2003, directed by Jung Joon-hwan, who brought us 1987, When the Day Comes. So this one was about a desperate man who plots to kidnap the CEO of a chemical factory, who he believes to be the leader of an alien race plotting to take over the Earth. So now, just 7 days before the lunar eclipse, when he expects the alien prince to arrive and bring about Earth's destruction, the man must prove his theory about the aliens correct and expose them for what they are at all costs in order to save the planet. So Save the Green Planet is by far one of the most memorable films from the early days of new Korean cinema that I saw, and is, in my opinion, among the all-time great first watches of any movie out there. The film contains some fun lore of its own and an amazing finale that I can't help but feel inspired movies like 10 Cloverfield Lane and others without giving away too much. It's also got one of the most fitting OSTs I've ever heard, and the cinematography by Hong Young-pyo, whom I've probably raved about more than a dozen times on this channel, is absolutely to die for. This movie made Shin Ha-kyun one of my favorite Korean actors for a long time, and I can really watch this one so many times. It's one of my most wanted Blu-rays of all time. I currently only have the DVD. I've got pretty much all the DVD releases available for this one. I so wish I had my limited edition DVD here to show you guys in Korea, but it came with some of the alien fighting tools, and it was just such a cool release. Came with the soundtrack and everything. So I have to rate Save the Green Planet a 9 out of 10. It is by far one of the best Korean type sci-fi films you guys are going to find. It also is one of the most credited Korean films for blending the various genres that early Korean cinema was so good at doing. So you could describe this one as a horror, sci-fi, drama, comedy, action. It really has it all. So Save the Green Planet is by far my cream of the crop for this episode of Korean sci-fi, exploration of the unknown, deep space aliens and sea monsters. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you guys are looking forward to my future uploads as going into this limited sci-fi series. Really trying to cover a broad scope of sci-fi as I get these things watched and rethought about. So let me know what you guys think about some of the films I've listed in this one. Also, what you guys are maybe looking forward to that I cover in future sci-fi episodes. So as always, if you guys enjoy this content, I really appreciate if you like and subscribe. And as always, until next time, just keep watching movies.